Today on The State of Us, millennials are supercharging the housing market and teaming up to fulfill the dream of home ownership. Millennials, are they putting away childish political things? Welcome to The State of Us. I'm your host, Justin T. Weller, joined, of course, today by our very friendly redneck liberal and senior historian, Mr. Lance L. Jackson. Today, millennials, all things millennials. The housing market and millennials, politics and millennials, millennial this, millennial that. Lance's pretty much favorite generation. It is, in fact, the generation that his two daughters belong to, that I belong to. So we'll get a boomer perspective today. And of course, we'll get the millennial perspective today, a millennial perspective and a boomer perspective. Lance and I won't presume to speak on behalf of our entire generation. That'd be a bit presumptuous. So Lance, what is the word of the day?
I'm choosing it because it has two pronunciations, and I was not aware of the other pronunciation. It's a two-syllable word. It is an intransitive verb. I've always pronounced it segue, but the dictionary says it can also be pronounced segue.
Segue versus segue.
A segue is to continue without a break, or as a noun, because it can also be a noun, is an immediate transition from one part to another, as in music. So we have many segues within our show.
Yes.
And because we will move from one thing to another without a break. And we also have many segues, which is we go from one part to another with music. So we segue all the time here.
Okay, so I have a question.
I have like a 6-0 lead right now.
Well, that's I was going to say. I marked down 3, but you'd have 4. Do we count when you introduce the word for the first time?
I don't think that's fair because that's just part of that's not me putting it into the content of the show.
Well, by that count, then you've said segue 3 times, not counting the first time that you said it. Segue is also a sort of a machine, right? That's on 2 wheels and you zoom around on, and people do the Segway tours of cities. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, that's not a Segway, is it?
Yeah. I mean, that's what those things are called.
That's what that's called?
Yeah, Segway.
Interesting.
That's the brand.
That's the company name.
Well, I'm not sure that there is another name for them. I mean, I think that's what I think they are not just branded that way. I think they are Segways.
The dictionary I'm using was not printed. When it was printed,
they didn't exist.
They didn't exist. Yes.
Back in the good old days. So speaking of the good old days, we've talked a lot about housing on this show and the wealth gap between millennials and boomers. See, there was a segue. And what we're looking at...
If you have to announce them, then they're not segues.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm just pointing it out to fit in the word usage. But for years, conventional wisdom has held, according to this Wall Street Journal article, that millennials who were born from 1981 through 1996 would become the generation that largely spurned home ownership. Instead, since 2019, when they surpassed the baby boomers to become the largest living adult generation in the United States, they have reached a housing milestone, accounting for more than half of all home purchase loan applications last year. So millennials are now the majority of new home buyers, making up more than half of the market. And the median price of an existing home sold in October of this year was nearly $354,000, close to a record, and up about 13% from a year ago, according to the National Association of Realtors. Prices have climbed from a year earlier for a record 116 straight months, with double-digit percentage gains touching every corner of the United States. And you might say, well, why is it notable that they're making up the this large share now of homeowners? Well, I think the big one, and we've talked a lot about this, is sitting on the sidelines has meant missing out on one of the biggest sources of wealth creation for past generations, and that's equity in a home. In 2019, households of older millennials had a net worth about 11% below expectations based on what older Americans had at the same age, while younger millennials' net worth was 50% below the Federal Reserve Bank of St. Louis, according to the Federal Reserve Bank of St. Louis. So, I mean, one, let that sink in. Younger millennials' net worth was 50% below. Okay. Now, those that were older and owned a home were only 11% below. But part of this also has to deal with, and I think this is important to think about, Lance, we talk all the time about investing as early as you can, right? Well, one downside to waiting to purchase a home is that because you're investing later, especially if you're taking a conventional 30-year mortgage, it also therefore is going to be later into life when you pay off that home, right? Because somebody like me, for example, who is unconventional from the millennial standpoint, my home is going to be paid off. Oh boy, got to do some math here. I'm writing it out on the piece of paper because that's how we do things. My home's probably going to be paid off by the time I'm 43. Mm-hmm. Okay. Which is a good bit. I mean, generally speaking, that's probably earlier even than some, boomers and other people. So I understand that's not a standard situation, but the point is that's an advantage because then after that, right, I have the opportunity to continue to generate wealth in other ways, whether that's borrowing against the home because of additional equity in it, whether that's selling the home and getting the return on it, or living without the cost of that monthly housing payment, or whatever it might be. All of that comes sooner. So that's, I think, part of what you see, but there's a lot of factors that go into that wealth generation. And so here's the sticky wicket thing that we have to try to answer, right? As we segue into the discussion. Is it good that millennials are now taking up homeownership?
Well, my first comment is I didn't realize, as the article states here, in 2019, baby boomers were surpassed by millennials as the largest living adult generation in the United States.
That's right.
So we're losing power, folks. But we still have
Finally.
We still have influence. Well, again, these millennials think they know everything until they get into something, and then they're like, "Oh, what's this mean? Oh, who do you have to ask? Oh, a boomer." Because you don't know everything. You know everything that you know, but you don't know everything. Think on that one.
Oh, yeah.
But it's also interesting, and with these numbers, since Justin loves statistics, since he likes numbers, statistics, that the millennial generation made up 67% of first-time home purchases on mortgage applications for the first 8 months of 2021. And I think that's really kind of interesting. Means 2 out of every 3, right? So, but here's why it's important, okay, that they own home, that I believe they should own homes, is because my mortgage is not paid off yet.
Right.
But I have refinanced 3 times. I've used my home as a capital investment to do other things. For example,
you've taken advantage of the equity.
20 years ago, our family was growing and we thought, let's go look for another house. And then it was like, well, we really like where we live. Oh, we have property. So let's expand. So we refinanced our original mortgage to add on and basically build almost a second home, and our addition was almost as big as the home we had, but we had the land available. Then 10 years later, our daughters were in college, and rather than borrow money from the government at a high rate to pay off student loans, we refinanced on the house again to pay their tuition because we could borrow the money on the house cheaper than we could to borrow it from the government. And then a business opportunity opened up 3 or 4 years ago, and I refinanced again. Now, not for the maximum each time, but it allowed me to borrow money at a lower rate than I would have had I been looking to go into the bank for a business or for a school loan or to buy more house. And when I bought my home, it was because I wanted a place to live with very few neighbors, extra land, and a quiet place where my children could grow up, which I accomplished. But what I learned, okay, because my parents didn't do this, I have borrowed against the equity in the house 3 times to do things that came up in life. And I think that's the key reason why people should buy a home. Many people buy it for the same reason I did. They want they want some space. They want to move. They want to have something. And they think, oh, I'm saving some money. Okay. But what it allows you to do maybe is to use that home as long as, it's also unprecedented as low as interest rates are. Because I remember my parents buying their home at, 7-8% interest on the loan. And now you're getting it at, between 2.5% and 4%.
What we've talked about as a single person, cost benefit of owning a home is a little more tenuous because we've discussed before the many components of cost that obviously go into owning a home that's different than an apartment. However, we've also, I think, noted, and that's part of what Lance is pointing out, the equity components of owning a home, which is why it's really difficult to just say that it's a one-for-one match. Are boomers generally better off financially at the same point in life than millennials are? Yes. However, a lot of those measurements also take into account that boomers were owning homes sooner. And as the article points out, they were spending more of their income to own the home than millennials are. So there are some different components going into it that I think are very valuable for us to take into account of. I'm not sure that there's maybe some economist out there who could, navigate all these numbers and iron everything out perfectly for us and really give us the definitive answer of who's better off. But I think we're going to know 10, 15 years from now. You know what I mean? Because now that millennials are finally starting to really embrace home ownership, we'll see, 10, 15 years down the road when more of them have homes. Now, what does it look like, right? So it's almost, yes, one for one, boomers were better off at this age. The question is, as always is going to be, at retirement age, which is going to be different, but at their relative retirement ages, right? So if most boomers are looking at 55 to 65-ish, and then you've got, millennials, and maybe they're looking more like 70 to 75 for retirement or something like that. Ish, right, ish. Then how is that going to compare at their time of retirement? Because the other thing is more life left to live, right? I mean, as we talked about there, millennials being the largest living United States generation. So obviously there's boomers that have died enough that, millennials are the majority, or not the majority, the largest population, the generation with the highest plurality. So the point there being, is home ownership a good idea? It's been good for me, but I also got very lucky. I mean, just telling people, and we'll break down how I got lucky, and maybe hopefully how some other millennials out there who are looking at, well, I'd like to own a home, but I'm not sure if it's within reach. And we're going to talk about how far some millennials are reaching to make home ownership happen, and what does that have to do with millennials shrugging off politics? To find out, keep it here on The State of Us. We'll be right back. For those listeners that may be new to the program or who always tune out before the closing, you may not know that Lance and I live in or near the great city of Urbana. And no, this isn't Urbana, Illinois, as I am frequently asked when away from here. It is Urbana, Ohio, which, by the way, came before Urbana, Illinois. They actually copied our name.
But not before Urbana, Maryland. Maryland was before Urbana, Ohio.
We'll leave that part out of it. But point being, that we live in a small town, which is the county seat of our county, which only has about 40,000 people in the whole county. So that gives you some perspective of, what we're talking about here in terms of size. So the reason I mention all that is because when I'm talking about my home, what I purchased it for, what it is worth today, it's important to keep in mind that one of the reasons, because you might say, I'm going to tell you, right, about $155,000 is what we spent on that home. And you're going to be like, oh my gosh, how'd you get a home for, it must be awful. No, it's in a good part of town. It's 3 bedrooms, 2.5 baths. So no, it's not a huge home. It's just under 2,000 square feet, so it's not super big or anything like that, but it's respectable. It was built in 2005. It's a fairly typical house. I don't know what else to say.
And when Justin walks out in the backyard, his neighbors can all see him. So yeah,
exactly.
that's why I don't live there.
Exactly. It's a very typical suburb type home, with an interesting floor plan. But the point there is that, it was a lot less than what some of you listening may have spent, because if you live, we live 45 minutes from either of the two major metros. So property value is obviously a good bit less. So you buy that same home, it may have been closer to, 300 and whatever, 20 something thousand if you bought that, in Hilliard or Dublin, Ohio, which is a suburb of Columbus.
Right. You know what they say, the three most important things when it comes to buying a home.
What do they say?
Location, location, location. Those are the three most important things when you purchase a home.
And when I bought it, part of the reason its value was where it was, right, is because of exactly what we talked about. Now, though, home is worth $250,000, $260,000, and it's only been a few years. What accounts for part of the large uptick in this area is the number of people from Columbus and Dayton, which are those two metros areas that we talked about, who are doing exactly what Lance mentioned. Well, I want a space. I want some land. I want, an area that's a little slower pace, right? That's what I want. So I'm willing to commute and purchase stuff. So now we're finding in the neighborhood that I'm in, several of the houses that have sold that are just within a block or two of me are Columbus, Dayton transplants, who are looking for a quieter place to live with more land at a very reasonable price. So I think that I was fortunate because obviously I did not foresee that housing trend. I mean, we were counting on the home value going up, but obviously it's gone up quite a bit in the 5 years, something like that, 4 years that we've been at our home. That's a great, value increase there. But not everybody experiences that. And that's one of the things that I'm concerned about, Lance, with the current home landscape, is just how much, because they talked about in here, it's not about getting a loan, it's about can they win the bidding war. And that's concerning, because the other proposition, right, is spending $600,000 or $800,000 for a home. I mean, your home today is worth more than when you bought it, but it's not worth that much.
No, not even close.
And you have people that have your kind of income that are buying homes with that. So that's the other component of how much are you going to spend, to get that home that you're after.
Well, and I think this is where you have to look at it. Buying a home is just like investing money in the stock market. There is that boom and bust cycle. And right now we're in a boom cycle. And so prices are higher. And you're fine unless you need to sell your home or take equity out of your home during a bust cycle. And it wasn't that long ago, right? 2007, 2008. And, where we went through a bust cycle, and part of it had to do with homeowners who had been allowed to borrow more money than they could really afford because they were pushing money at people to buy homes. So, you need to, there mentioned this article, there was a home buying class at the local community college, and a couple took that class to find out. So they actually educated themselves before they stepped in and did it. So it's, again, for many people, for most of us, it's the biggest thing that we'll ever buy, the most expensive thing we'll do. And many times we don't do our due diligence and our homework on that. So I would suggest that you do that, because Justin's been talking about many of the positives of owning a home, but there are negatives as well. And just like when you go talk to your local investment person, they will tell you all the positives of investing, but there are also negatives. For example, now that I'm entering retirement age, do I want to take on another mortgage? Do I want to continue to invest money now at a time when I want to pull the money out? Or what happens if the stock market crashes now? Doesn't matter too much to Justin. Doesn't matter if home prices level off to Justin, because he's going to continue to earn and make money and invest, and his home might rebound. For me, it would mean that I have to get back into the job market. I would have to get back and work because I'm counting on the value of my home and my investments to help me live the kind of life I want in retirement. And then, as they point out in the article, these people bought a house and they're like, oh, I don't know what a septic tank is, but they say I've got a problem with it. And there are bats flying around out here and we don't know what to do with bats. And there's this funny odor coming out of the ground and we don't know what that is. Okay, glad you bought a 5-acre farmhouse.
The joys of home ownership, right?
Right, the furnace goes out.
Weird smell coming from here. What do I do about that?
The well pump doesn't work. It's only about $20,000 to dig a new well, to go down deep enough to get some water. What? You mean it just doesn't pipe in? So there you go, folks. There's a lot of things you have to think about. When you buy that house and then, oh, wait a minute, you have just the regular maintenance. Well, you need a new roof. I've owned my house for 30 years and we just put the second roof on it because, last 20, 25 years, right? Depending on, again, well, I got this guy to put on a roof. It was a lot cheaper than what you did. Yeah, and it lasted 10 years. You get what you pay for. And so, there are all those things that we don't think about that you don't know about when you're a homeowner, because I didn't. When I was the same age that the millennials are now and I purchased my first home in my late 20s, I'm like, oh, what? I can make the monthly payment, but you mean I got to pay for heating oil and I got to do this and I got to do that? And I didn't realize that. And I got to take care of it. I got to mow it or have somebody else mow it. I got to rake all the leaves. I got to
There's stuff to
cut
do.
down trees or again, you hire somebody else to do it. And it's like, okay, now you're not going out quite as much. Number one, not because of money necessarily, but you have things you have to do to your home or to your property in order to keep it up so that it is valuable in the future.
That boomer wisdom being imparted. And that's exactly, Lance provided a perfect segue to our next topic, which is how sort of millennials are shrugging off the conventional ideas of home ownership. They're shrugging off politics and conventional wisdom in some ways. And then in other ways, you might be surprised that they're not. But one of the ways they're doing that, Lance alluded to this, is in redefining who buys a home together. Because typically, right, I think if most of us think, well, those are people that are married, right? That's who buys homes. And yes, that is, in fairness, if we look at the data, that is the vast majority of people that buy homes are people that are married. But millennials are showing an increasing percentage of those people who are buying homes together who are not married. And oh my gosh, living in sin. Okay, well, it's not everybody is buying with a significant other. In fact, a sizable portion of people are not buying with a significant other, but rather with a friend. There are lots of millennials, obviously, that are still single, that are unmarried, who may very well want to own a home, but who look at it and say, yeah, I'm not sure that individually I want to own the home. But if I had somebody or 2 or 3 people to split it with, why not do that? And that's an interesting notion. And one that we'll talk a little bit more about. The other notion is, and I have a friend that's doing this actually, they bought the house. They got 2 or 3 friends that live with them who they're renting to. So there is more than one way to skin the cat, right? So to speak. But we'll talk about that and more here in just a moment. Keep it here on The State of Us, and we'll be right back.
Love that segue music, by the way.
Yeah, this segue music is good, huh? Okay. Just make that seamless transition. I think that's a matter of perspective, though, is it not? Some people may not feel that our transitions are all that seamless. So I got a tie game at the moment, 5-5.
No, but seams are the spice of life.
Yeah?
Yeah, you don't want to be seamless because that's boring.
Okay.
Seams are the spice of life.
The spice of life. More boomer wisdom today, ladies and gentlemen. We need a sound effect that we play.
To your point, right?
The boomer wisdom.
The number
moments.
of co-buyers with different last names has increased over 700% between 2014 and 2021.
It's a bit of an increase.
But I guess when you go from one person did it.
Right.
It's not hard to get to 700%. You know, when you look at the numbers.
You go from 1 to 700%, right? Did I get that right?
Mm-hmm.
Is that, well, no.
Something like that. I don't know. Okay. That's math. We don't do math.
We got people here that like history.
I think you introduced me as the historian.
Historian.
Right.
We not the mathematician.
We don't do math unless it's addition and subtraction of years.
So if I start introducing you as a senior mathematician at True Chat,
then I'll figure up your percentages for you.
Okay.
I can tell you that 7 years ago meant 87 years. And that what Abraham Lincoln was referring to from the Gettysburg Address was the Declaration of Independence. That's about as the extensive math knowledge that yours truly has at his fingertips.
How about a fortnight?
I can look it up. That's a video game.
No, I mean the term Fortnite is.
I thought they would be impressed that a millennial or that a boomer knew that Fortnite was a video game.
Yeah, they're highly impressed at your amazement of skills. It's a period.
A fortnight is 20 years, isn't it?
2 weeks.
2 weeks. Well, yeah, that's close. I knew there was a 2 in there.
It'll be a fortnight. Lance will see you in 20 years.
I thought it was.
We'll be back in 2 weeks.
I'll be there eventually.
Oh, you're here a bit early.
But because I'm a boomer, I'll have food for you.
That's right.
We can always,
there you go, a fortnight.
I tested all of my, I wasn't feeling good the other day. And I did all the tests and all the diagnostic tests and everything else. And on one of those home testing things. And it came back. I was just a little bit low on my biscuits and gravy. So I just needed to have some biscuits and gravy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did that fix everything?
It did. It made everything. My numbers were perfect. I felt good. I had energy. I wasn't lethargic anymore. And I was just energetic. And yeah, all you got to do is my biscuit and gravy intake was low. So
the pandemic added fuel to the trend of co-buyers with different last names. Among all age groups during the early pandemic months, April to June of 2020, 11% of buyers purchased as an unmarried couple and 3% as other, essentially roommates. Those numbers were up from 9% and 2% respectively in the previous year. So just in a year, you saw a 1 percentage point increase from those previous numbers, and a trend that'll probably, my guess is continue. As we talked about millennials getting married later in life and even putting off marriage altogether. I think part of what we're finding is, they've decided that doesn't mean though, that we can't reap some of the benefits of married life. And that's something that Lance and I have long discussed on this show, is the inequity perhaps of, the financial benefits of marriage that are built into society that you don't have the ability to fully realize if you're unmarried. It would be nice if there were some options for some of those benefits for people. And I think this is a way, again, not 100% because you don't get into some of the same exactly tax benefits, but you do get into some of the investment, equity, long-term wealth building type benefits of going in together. And I know, hopefully it's not too presumptuous, Lance, but do you think this is something that your daughters might consider doing?
Are they forward thinking enough to do this? More than forward thinking. Yes, I could see them contemplating this. However, they are both so much individuals that I can't see them really getting along with anybody to do that if there wasn't a stronger commitment than just friendship.
So you either have to find somebody that also likes things the same way, or be with somebody who you're willing to make the sacrifice.
And they could never do it together because they keep house and their business hours and they are not compatible to do it together. But are they forward thinking enough and young professional women to know the advantages, and would they be open to that if they found somebody that would do that or that they could do that with? Yes. Do I think they would do it? No, I don't think they would do it. It's just because it doesn't fit their personality type. And I think that's the key, right? And again, whether you buy with a friend or you buy with a spouse or a significant other, what's the saying now? +1, right? You got a +1. It's still, as they point out in the article, it's there's a lot of legal stuff you need to work out. I mean, you say, okay, who makes the payment? I mean, somebody's got to send it in. Somebody's got to set it up in their bank account.
Who pays the electric and the internet and the taxes?
You've got the bills and who calls, like I said.
Who mows the lawn?
Who calls the plumber? Who does this when things are wrong? I thought the interesting solution that I read was that these two friends developed a program that they called the House Czar. And the House Czar meant that you ran the house. You were the financing, making sure that the bills got paid, the landscaping got done, and the money got collected from the other person for a year. And then the following year, the house
switches to somebody else.
The other partner, the other friend then was the House Czar. But if you don't get it down in writing and all you have is a handshake, you're looking at a lot of, possible loss of friendships here, as Ben Franklin said. The visitors and fish both smell in 3 days, so.
Stink after 3 days. Yep. Him and John Adams actually shared a bed when they were traveling at one point, and they had this huge debate over whether to leave the window open at night or not. So one of them thought they would get too cold, and the other one was concerned that it'd get too hot.
From what I've read, I'm surprised that Ben Franklin wasn't spending the night in bed with a female companion, because he very rarely slept alone when he was traveling.
Yes,
he must have been low on money to share a bed with John Adams to save money, because from what I hear about Ben Franklin, he had a plethora of girlfriends that he spent time with.
He did. But I thought it's an interesting point about they only were spending one night in a room they were sharing the cost of together. And, they both said they didn't get any sleep, because the debate about the window lasted hours and hours into the night about whether it should be open or closed.
Two of the greatest orders in American history. I would have loved to have been a fly in that room as they were discussing
pros and cons
of the windows. Right.
Well, because John Adams insisted that, of course, the fresh air was good for the soul and you'd sleep better. And, and Ben Franklin was concerned about them getting ill because it was too cold that night, and back and forth on the, but you can just imagine, right? I mean, that's just the window, and it's like, that's nothing else. So
where do you set the thermostat?
Right. Yeah. Oh, well, thankfully they didn't have a thermostat. That would have been a whole other, but the point is, it's amazing what married people can learn, right, from friends who are moving in who say, well, we're going to put all this down in writing. Why don't married people do that?
You just caused something to a bell to go off in my head. How much money would I have saved in flannel pajamas if I just raised the thermostat at home over the last 30 years?
What's the cost benefit, right?
What's the cost analysis there, and the amount of money I've spent on clothes to keep them warm. If I had just said, you know what, we'll turn the thermostat up.
And then you don't need to close.
Right.
It'll be warm. So,
but should have negotiated that.
Brett and I actually did that. Now, granted, I guess this is worth mentioning. It doesn't even, this is a generational shift thing, right? And I'm sure an orientation thing. Brett and I were not married when we bought our house. I don't know why this is just now occurring to me. It's like the whole show's been
Justin and Lance having epiphanies through the segues.
Right. Yes. But, we weren't married. I mean, we are now, but we were not
when you purchased the house.
Okay, let me put it. We were not legally married in the eyes of the law when we purchased this house. So now we were in a committed long-term, partnership. So, and in fairness, we legally could not get married in the state of Ohio when we bought the house. So it's not like it was a conscious decision like, oh yeah, we're not, we're gonna buy this house and not be married. It's like, well, it is what it is, but the point being that we actually did that. Shortly after we moved in, we have a sheet. It's somewhere. It's probably gone now, but we divided up. Here's about what we think we spend each week doing these different things hours wise. And then we picked, we had basically two things, the things that we absolutely do not want to do and the things that we're okay doing. And then we just reconciled the differences, and surprise, surprise, we each ended up with one or two things that we don't like doing, but the hourly breakdown of who does what is very similar, and generally are the tasks that the other one can't, stand. Or if the task is done differently, can't stand the task being done differently. Because see, that's a big one too.
That's the big one right there.
I
did the dishes. You didn't know I want them done.
That's yep.
Have you gotten sick yet? Nope. Then don't worry about it. Yep. Not killing you.
Yep. I vacuum the house for that reason. So I
why you have to go up and down and not across?
No, it just my idea of how thorough the vacuuming should be, I think, is different from my husband's idea. So the thoroughness component, and some people look at me funny, but I
do the daily cleaning, but when she wants to, do deep cleaning, mopping, it's like, okay, go for it. I swept it out. I vacuumed. Well, yeah, but the stuff in the corners and this and that. You know what? I pulled down the biggest cobwebs. Do you want to get the rest of it?
I don't crawl under there. It doesn't matter.
I'm not moving the furniture
back there.
I'm not moving the furniture. You want me to move the furniture? I mean, come on. Nobody sees it anyway. It's underneath the furniture.
Besides, we're going to have to rearrange anyway at some point.
Oh, gosh, don't do that. Don't do that. All the bruises on my legs over the years because furniture got rearranged and I'm just walking to my normal path and all of a sudden, bang, crack. What happened? Well, you were gone today to a ball game. So while you were away, I rearranged the living room. And I always complain for like the first 2 days. And then it's like, okay, this is the new normal and I'm all right.
See, mine, I think, stems from, I am constantly, and this is maybe the OCD thing, trying to figure out the best way for things to be arranged. And of course, the failure there is the acceptance that there is no best way, but the need to say, okay, well, it's been this way now for a year, and here's the things that are bad about it. So how can we change this so that it's not bad anymore?
We can make it more efficient.
Right. And then you change it, but then there's different things that are bad. And so the cycle goes, right? And I know different people rearrange for different reasons. That's my thing, is the trying to, get it to be the ideal thing. And it's like, well, but again, the faults that we all live with that we know. And that's the segue, ladies and gentlemen, to why we're doing this show today, right, Lance?
Well, we're doing this show because it was on the schedule.
Well, okay.
And our loyal listeners would be wanting to know, what are these two yo-yos going to talk about today? But the reason we talk about it in the manner that we do is because True Chat's mission is to educate people by providing honest, open, and respectful conversations. That's a nice segue to let you know that it is the ending of the show. And if you're talking to your friends, you can tell them they can find us on Spotify, Overcast, Stitcher, Apple Podcast, and everywhere podcasts are found.
The State of Us is available Tuesdays and Thursdays as a podcast and heard on the weekends in select talk radio markets around the country, AM and FM radio stations. I've got a 7 to 7 at the moment. So, that
one of those kissing your sisters by another tie.
Is that? I'm not sure.
I'm like the Baltimore Ravens. I'd go for a 2-point conversion and go for the win, even though they've done it twice and lost both times. That's what I would do.
For the State of Us on True Chat in Urbana, Ohio, the closing segue. I'm Justin T. Weller.
I'm Lance Jackson.
Special thanks to our producer Bradley Butch. Thank you all, our audience, for tuning in. We'll see you next time. Be the change. Be sure to check out our website, thestateofus.org, for books, articles, and all the ways to tune in. thestateofus.org.